So now we're on page Lamed Vavam in Beis, and the Gemara is going to quote a pasuk here Malachi at the end of the Tanakh. It says, "B'me'era atem ne'arim v'osi atem kovim hagoy kulo." Right, with a curse you are cursed. Yet we do for you, and we rob the entire nation. Ikagoy kulo in ilolo. If the entire goy, the entire nation, is able to comply with the gzera, then the gzera is fully valid and it is operative. But ilolo, if you can't get the entire nation or rove, which is like kol, to accept and uphold the gzera, then forget it. The gzera is but gufa. Omar Bali, Omar of Imi Osara Mishmei, the Rav. Pitom v'shamna v'yenom v'sazman kulum shon says b'nosei my time my. What was this gzera on b'nosei? I mean, if you talk about the daughters of goyim, you can't marry them because lotus chatiba. That's a doraisa. Why would it be included on the gzera? Omar of Nachbar Yitzchak gozo b'noseim nidos mary sosa. They gave the status of a newborn baby, a female child that was born to the idolaters. They gave the status of a nida. And this would also support and strengthen the gzeira of harchaka to make sure that we don't intermarry, because this woman is a nida. Ugniva, that's the name of an amora. Mishmei de Rav Omar. Kulon mishum of avodas kochavim gozmen. In all these cases, whether it be the oil, whether it be the wine, whether it be the bread, whether it be the daughters, it's always going to be for the same reason, to protect us from idol worship. When he came from Eretz Yisrael, and he said the following: Gozrel Pita Mishum Shamnon. Again, I don't know which should come first, Pita or Shamnon. We'll have to see about that later on in the Gemara. But whichever it is, there was a gzera that was made on the idolaters regarding their bread and their oil. So the Gemara says, wait a minute, my ulmoi the shemen mi pas. It's a very strange language here. They made a gzera on the pas because of the shemen, as if to say that the ikar gzera was really shemen, but they needed to add pas in order to protect and be marking people from shemen. Ella, so rather, let's rewrite the statement of Haracha. El al piton v'shamnon mishum yenam. In other words, we start with the harchaka of not eating the breads of the goyim and not using the oil of goyim, and that will lead to protect us from drinking the wine of the goyim. V'al yenam mishum b'nosehem, and the gzera of yayin would further be marchik us from b'nosehem. V'al b'nosehem mishum davar acher. All right. So now we have to figure out what's al b'noseim mishum davar acher. Davar acher is a way of saying avodah zara. The Gemara sometimes doesn't want to get those words out of its mouth, so instead it calls it davar acher, something else. Now, apparently, once you start chumming and chas v'shalom marrying into a non-Jewish woman and their family, then they schlep you into their avodah zara. It's a matter of time before they get you to worship their idols. But what's al dover acher mishum dover acher? What's that about? Apparently, dover acher is another decree amongst the 18 decrees that are irrevocable, but it's not about avodah zarah. You don't have to make a gzera not to marry a shiksa, because the Torah says siv lo sichatin bo. And the Gemara answers this: the Oraisa, the Isur lo tiskatein bam, applies to the seven nations that occupy Palestine. Sheva umos. Avol sharov de kachavim lo. That pasuk lo tiskatein bam does not apply to other nations that are not in Eretz Yisrael. The asu idu v'gazer afilu the shar of the kachavim. Right, the Talmidim of Hillel and Shammai came along, and their decree was even against marrying the daughters of idol worshippers. Because if you come to marry the daughters of idol worshippers, you'll end up worshiping their idols. So it's an unbelievable chiddush here, and I've been around the block, but I didn't know this Gemara, that the Isa lo tischatim bam only applies to the Sheva Umos, the seven nations. I mean, the Gemara is going to reject this going to Rashbi, but I'm now going to Chachamim. In fact, the Gemara Rav Shimon Yochai, Di Omar, he has a pasuk, Ki Yosir es bincha me'achorai, l'rabos kol ha'mesiros, okay, so I'm not sure how to understand this drasha. Let's see. 1 second, sorry, I'm just going to. But he will turn your son away from me. So I think what it means that a son of Israel who marries a non-Jewish woman, her father, meaning his father-in-law by marriage, who's not Jewish, is going to cause your son, meaning the Jew who married his daughter, to turn away from God, from the real true God, and get this son-in-law, this Jewish son-in-law, to worship the idols. Comes on Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, and he says that this pasuk, beyond Lo Tischatein Bam, which only refers to the seven nations, expands the Isur of marrying the daughter of any idol worshiper, no matter where on the face of the earth they are, the Philippines, or anywhere in Asia, anywhere. So Michael and Meimah, once again, why was there any sort of need for Gzeira D'Rabbanan not to marry an idolatress? And you would think, oh, well, they wanted to extend it beyond the seven nations, but the Torah itself extended it beyond the seven nations, and that's Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. Ella, says the Gemara Doraisa, Ishus Derech Chasnas. The Torah says, Lo Tischatein Bam, meaning that you take this non-Jewish woman, this idolatress, into a kind of marriage celebration, ceremony. And again, I don't know what it looks like. Hopefully not in a church. I don't know. So that's called Derech Chasnas. It's not Derech Znus. He's not just, living with her with a one-night stand, but rather he's like Keilu marrying a civil marriage, we'll call it. The Asu, and because I feel Derech Znus, came along Hillel and Shammai, and they made a gzeira that you're not allowed to have any relations, any intimacy with a non-Jewish woman. The Gemara doesn't like it because Dus Nami goes back to an early gzeira from the time of Shem ben Noach, and therefore we don't need Hillel and Shammai to institute this gzeira. And how do we know that as early in history as the time of Shem ben Noach, there was a gzeira for the descendants of Shem, who were not yet Jewish technically, but they accepted upon themselves to fulfill the mitzvah Torah before it was given, and that Shem made a gzeira that they can't have any relationship, even a znus relationship, with a non-Jewish woman, And we know this Tichsiv, Vayomer Yehuda Hotziu Lisarif, V'tisarif. So in the episode of Tamar, who was waiting for Yibum, and she, dressed herself up as a harlot and became pregnant. She really became pregnant from Yehuda himself. I mean, Yehuda didn't dream that, that was Tamar, his own daughter-in-law. So he said, Yehuda Hotziuli Saref, because she had a relation with a guy. Now, how does Hill know that the Boel was a guy? And the answer is because there were very few Jews in the world at that time. And if she became pregnant, Yesh Laniach, we can assume that she became pregnant from a guy and violated the Gzera of Beis Dino Shel Shem. So once again, why would we need Hill and Shammai? Eladoraisa, Ovikochov Mabal Bas Yisrael. On a Doraisa level, the whole Isur applies. I guess when he says Doraisa, he's referring to the Gzeir of Shem. I'm not sure exactly why the Gemara used the term Doraisa to explain the decree of Shem. But anyway, what was included in the Gzeir of Shem? It was an idol worshiper, male, who cohabits, I should say, with a Jewish female. The Mashcha Basre. In other words, this non-Jew, the Shegetz, who's marrying a Jewish woman, will draw this woman, because she's sort of under his kind of control, to worship Avoda Zara. I might think that Shem never made because again, the Gzera of Shem was a response to the episode of Tamar. So it was Hotziuli Saref because Tamar, had a relationship presumably with a guy. But in the opposite, reverse case, where it's a Jewish man having a relationship with a non-Jewish woman, the idolatrous, that wasn't included in the Gzera of Shem. V'asu iyu inu gaza afilu Yisrael haba alavedis kacham. Came along Hill and Shami, they extended the Gzera to include a Jewish man having a relationship with a non-Jewish woman. God doesn't like that either, because Yisrael haba alavedis kachavim aloch l'moshe misinayu. We don't need a Gzera of Shammai and Zaken to prohibit a Jewish man marrying a shiksa or having a relationship with a shiksa. And the reason why Shem ben Noach made a Gzera with his Bezdin against a Jewish woman marrying a non-Jewish man is because the reverse case was already prohibited al Moshe Sinai. Notice it has stats of a Doraisa. Again, historically, chronologically, it's hard to work this out, but the Omar Mar Haboil Aram is Kanoim Pogimbo, right? We had in Parshas Pinchas last week that Pinchas killed Zimri ben Solu of Shevet Shimon because he had a relationship with Kozbi Basur, with a non-Jewish woman. So therefore, it must be halacha Moshe Sinai that a Jewish man is not allowed to have a cohabit with a non-Jewish woman. Elo doraisa for Hesio kamaisa shahoya. Maybe we could only derive from the episode of Pinchas a case where a Jewish man had a public act of cohabitation with a non-Jewish woman, and then kanoim pogimbo. That's the halacha mishims. But also inu goza fil b'tzina. But the halacha Moshe Sinai did not include a case where, in private, a man has a promiscuous act, a Jewish man with a non-Jewish woman. The Gemara says, I'm not happy with that either. But sinanami beis dino shel chashmonoi gozru. Although you might be correct in your assumption that there had to be a gzera for tzina, but That Gzeir Fitzino predates Hillel and Shammai and dates back to the time of Chashmonaim. And how do we know this? Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael. He said, Bezdin shel Chashmonoi Gozru, Yisrael haba al ha'ovedes kol chavet. So the Gzeir was instituted by the Chashmonoim and their Bezdin against a Jewish man having a relationship with a non-Jewish woman. And that's called Nashga. Okay, so Nashga, or according to Kiyosef Rovin, he said Nashgaz includes 4 decrees. Let's go through them very quickly. He has them here listed. So we start with the Nun. The Nun stands for Nida, and although a non-Jewish woman doesn't have the status of a Nida according to Torah law, but the Beis Din of Chashmonaim instituted the status of Nida to a non-Jewish woman. Then we have the Shin. Shin stands for Shivcha. A Jewish man is not allowed to marry a Shivcha. Right? Shivcha means a non-Jewish woman. And so wait a minute. Why do we need the Chashmonaim for that? Just one second. It says, so in truth, the Shin here of Shivcha is not the actual ruling of the Beis Din of Chashmonaim. Beis Din of Chashmonaim were ruling that you shouldn't have a relationship with a shiksa, and they said that if you're going to start with a shiksa, then you'll come to have a relationship with a shivcha knanis, which the Torah prohibits under lo yeh kodesh b'bnos Yisrael, or b'nei Yisrael. All right, then we get up to Gimel is Goya. Okay, and that has to do with any promiscuous cohabitation with an idolatrous, because that could lead to violating the doraisa of lo tischatim of a marital relationship. And finally, Aleph, according to the first nusach, refers to Eishes Ish, meaning that if a non-Jewish man marries a non-Jewish woman, which is fine, that woman is considered an Eishes Ish by virtue of the Gzeira of Beis Din shel Chashmonaim. So again, even though she's a married woman vis-a-vis another guy, but the Torah, as far as Jewish law amongst Jews is concerned, doesn't recognize that marriage, so she's technically not an Eishes Ish. But you know what? Once a man starts having a relationship with a married woman who's a goyata, married to a guy, then he might come to get used to it, and he enjoys it so much, he'll have a relationship with a married Jewish woman. So that's what the Chashmonaim did. Then we have Nashgaz. What's the Zion? Is Zona. So according to this Girs of Ravin, the Chashmonaim decreed that a Kohen who cohabitates with an idolatress be held liable for cohabitating with a Zona. Oh, so the Gemara answers, Ki Gozru Beis Din shel Chashmonaim bir. Aval yichud lo, they never instituted yichud for a Jewish man to be secluded in a room with an idolatress. And also inu Gozru afilu yichud. So the Gemara says, yichud nami Beis Dino shel David Gozru. I don't need the Chashmonaim. Tiyamar Rabbi Yehuda also saw Gozru al yichud when there was a mice of Tamar with Amnon, which is a half brother with a half sister, that they were alone together and then they had relations. So Bezdin Shel David at that point instituted a gzera for prohibiting yichud. So the Gemara says, Amri Hasam Yichud de Bas Yisrael. Maybe what the Chashmonaim were doing is the original decree of David HaMelech was a man alone with a Jewish woman, like Tamar with Amnon. But how about a Jewish man being alone, secluded with a non-Jewish woman? Also, into that we need the late Xera of Yichud Ovedis Kochavim, and that was the Xera of Hillel and Shammai. In fact, the Gemara Yichud de Bas Yisrael Doraisahi. How could you tell me that Bezdin Shel David HaMelech instituted a decree against having yichud with a Jewish woman? Yichud with a Jewish woman is doraisa. The Yomer of Yochanan Mishum Rav Yishim ben Yotzadok Remez Lichud Yichud Torah Shenemar. Okay, this is a complicated remez. We'll just do it superficially. And that is Shenemar Yiki Yisischa Chicha Beni Mecha. This is a parsha of Maseches. And the Gemara wants to know, why does it mention Achicha Beni Mecha? V'chi Ben Aim, only the son of your mother would entice you to violate a worship of Avoda Zara, Ben Av Eno Mesis. And if it was a brother who's the son of your father, no, it's a half brother from your father as opposed to half brother from your mother, which is explicit in the pasuk, he would not seduce you to violate Avodah Zara, Ella, but rather it's talking about Yichud. Ben misyachedim imo, ve'enacher misyachedim kol harayis b'Torah. So anyway, we see that Yichud with an Erev is forbidden by biblical law. Why would Bezdin Shel David have to institute any sort of decree on something that's also d'oraisa? Yichud d'oraisa deishis ish. That Isa d'oraisa of Yichud is with an erva. Also, David, because I feel Yichud Pnuya, but a single Jewish man with a single Jewish woman, that's not erva, and therefore we need the Bezdin of David to add that as an Isa d'Rabbanan on top of the Doraisa of an erva, of Yichud with an erva. Now we have another generation after David. Asu Talmidim by Sham Beisil because I feel Yichud Yovedes Kalchavim. In the third round, the Talmidim of Beit Shammai Beis Hillel instituted a Gzera, and they decreed that a Jewish man is not allowed to be alone with an idolatress. And that wasn't included in the Gzera of David, which only applied to a Jewish woman, having yichud with a Jewish woman. Excuse me for just 1 minute. Now, Rav Acha bar Ada had made a statement about Dover Acher Mishum Dover Acher. So the Gemara don't know my. What is that all about? Omer Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Gozru al Tinok Oved Kol Chavim Sheyitame Beziva. Well, we said that a newborn girl to an idol worshiper has the status of a nida. Now we're saying that there's a parallel status in Tumah called a zav. And they impose the status of a zav in this gzera onto a newborn baby boy born to an idolater. And why did they do so? We wanted to keep our boys away from associating and rubbing shoulders with the non-Jewish boys. Apparently, the Goyim was so used to Mishkav Zocher that if you have these boys that are associating with each other, then they might lead to Mishkav Zocher. So they imposed the status of Zoch. In other words, I brought questions in front of Rav Asi, and Rav Zera says that, I put a lot of effort into it. Rav Asi ate Rav Yochanan, very often Rav Asi would ask his Rebbe Muvhak back in Eretz Yisrael, Rav Yochanan ate Rav Yanai. And Rabbi Yochanan would go back to his Rebbe, a Tana by the name of Rabbi Yanai. Rabbi Yanai would ask this question, Eitz Rabbi Nosson ben Amram, Rabbi Nosson ben Amram, Eitzel Rebbe. And finally, this question came in front of Rebbe, Tinok Ove Kochav Memasai Mitami Beziva, V'yamar Li Ben Yoma. From the moment that this child, this male child, is born to an idolater, he has the status of a Zav. Ukshabasi Eitzel Rabbi Chia Amar Li Ben Teisha Shana V'yom Echad. Rabbi Chia had a different opinion. According to his opinion, only after the child reaches the age of 9 and a day, meaning he's royal Labia, only at that point is he awarded the status of a Zah. Shabasi Ritzesi Dvar Lifnei Rebbe, Amar Li, Hanach Dvarai Vechoz B'dir Reb Chia. Forget about what I told you, that from the day he's born, he's a Zah, but take and hold on to the view of Rabbi Chia. That Tinok Ben from the age of 9. And why is the age of 9 in a day so significant? Says the Gemara on top of Lamed Zayin. A 9-year-old boy, like a 3-year-old girl, are considered to be legally capable of cohabitating. A cohabitational act at a younger age is not legally valid, not recognized. Since the reason for the decree deeming the idolater child to be a Zav was so the Jewish child would not associate with him for the purpose of Mishkav Zochar, is therefore Chazal did not apply this decree until the idolater child is old enough to engage in Mishkav Zochar. Mishkav Zochar is only with a child who's 9 years and 1 day old. Okay, then, this is where we'll stop. And tomorrow at 9:30, if that works for you, that would be great. Okay,
I'm
then?
not going to be tomorrow.
Oh, yeah, you told me. Right. You gave me the heads up. You'll be putting tefillin on your grandson.
Right.
That's more important. That's very exciting. I thought maybe you were speaking. I was going to offer you an insight of mine, on
Thank
tefillin.
you.
Tefillin and bar mitzvah. Okay, call too. Bye-bye. So I'll see you on Sunday.